Narayana Samarambam Vyasa Shankaramadhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Dhyana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitartaya Tattva Bodha-The. In the last video, we started to talk about qualifications. For the words mental qualities or mental preparedness could be substituted for the word qualifications, because that's what we're talking about here. A particular kind of mind, not a list of accomplishments or prior study of particular facts and figures or particular texts. Okay, we're saying that someone qualified to study Vedanta is a person with a particular kind of mind. And we started to discuss some of the qualities of mind. In the last video, we talked about discrimination, viveka, and we also talked about dispassion, vairagya. Two very important qualifications, because you have to have a discriminating mind to properly distinguish between what you are and what you aren't, between the self, the atma, and the not self, anatma, between you and objects. You have to be able to have a mind that's capable of doing that, because the text said that discriminating between the two is the key to self-knowledge, the key to freedom. And you also have to have dispassion, because a dispassionate mind is a mind that is calm and composed, basically. You know, a mind that's not too agitated by fears and desires, a mind that is not constantly worried about the results of its actions, and a mind that is not trying to get permanent freedom or happiness from the acquisition of objects. A mind that's not addicted to objects. Okay, so we covered the first two of the four qualifications. The fourfold qualifications, again, for those who are interested, sadhana, chatushtaya. So we've done number one, discrimination. Number two, dispassion. And now we've come to number three. Right? This Vedanta is hard work. You know, there's lots of qualifications required, and it might be bad news to know that qualification number three actually has 6 parts. So when we say fourfold qualifications, technically we mean that there is 9. And even in some other Vedanta texts, they list some additional qualifications or variations on these things. Okay, so qualification number 3, the 6-fold accomplishments. The Sanskrit term is Shamati, Shatka, Sampati, or Sampatihi. Okay, and Shatka just means 6. Sampatihi means wealth or accomplishment. Swami Paramarthananda likes to define it as discipline, because discipline is the greatest wealth or treasure or accomplishment that you can have. And the first part of the word Shamati, adi means beginning with, or alternately, etc. So it's the 6-fold accomplishments beginning with Shama, or the 6-fold accomplishments Shama, etc. So we're saying then that this one has 6 parts, and the first one is Shama. All right, so let's go to the text here. If you haven't already done it, you can go to the website, endofknowledge.com. In the books section, you can download my commentary on this text and follow along with us here. Or if you're really ambitious, you can read ahead in the commentary. But if you do read the commentary, I'll say that I'm going to probably teach it just a little bit different than the commentary I wrote, to kind of cover things from a different angle slightly and keep things interesting too. So, the sixfold accomplishments. What are the sixfold accomplishments? The first accomplishment is a composed mind available for contemplation. So we've said this is Shama. Shama is a composed mind. And why do you need a composed mind? So it's available for contemplation. That's what this whole thing is. I've said that a few times, that all Vedanta is what? Listening. You expose yourself to the teachings on a regular basis in a systematic fashion, and then you contemplate the meaning of those teachings to resolve any kind of doubts you have about what you heard. So if it's just listening and contemplation, right, that's what Vedanta is. Nothing more than that, nothing fancy, nothing mystical, just listening to the teaching. And if that doesn't fully remove your ignorance, if it doesn't fully remove your doubts, then you have to contemplate on the meaning until those doubts go. And that's not possible if your mind isn't available for you to be used, right? Because ignorance and doubt occurs in the mind. And so the removal of ignorance and doubt also occurs in the mind, using the faculties of the mind. You have a function in your mind that helps you to think things through. You have a thinking process in there. We call it the intellect or the buddhi. That function is there in the mind, looking at two different things, looking at different alternatives, sorting through them, and thinking over certain things to resolve doubt. Right? Doubt's another function of the mind. We call that manas. And when the mind doubts, the intellect helps to sort those things out. So if the mind is tied up in various things, various different kinds of thoughts or various different kinds of desires, etc., then it's not going to be there for you to use. I mean, the mind is a tool that you use, and so it has to be composed, meaning calm, meaning peaceful. Okay, everyone's heard the word shanti. All right, shanti means peace, so you need a mind that has shanti. All right, you need a mind that's peaceful, so your faculties are there and available for you to use and apply to the teaching. All right. Now, in all of these things, like this first accomplishment, willpower is a factor, but it's not just willpower. You have to think these things through. If your mind is really disturbed by certain things, let's say certain fears or desires, you have to contemplate and weigh those fears and desires into relation, in relation to what the teaching is telling you. All right, if the teaching is telling you that you're whole and complete, that you're limitless, you have to kind of weigh your desires against that. All right, if the teaching is telling you that there is no happiness to be found in objects, because the experience of happiness is just a reflection of your own limitless nature, you have to kind of apply that too. Do I need to entertain all of these fears, all of these desires? If I'm unchanging consciousness, if I'm limitless, infinite, and eternal, right? If I'm eternal, that means I'm not born and I don't die and I don't change in between. So if that's the case, if that's what I am, then I have to weigh my fears against that. Okay? Do I really have anything to be afraid of if I don't change? So we have to kind of think these things through. We're talking about excessive fear here. There's reasonable fear, okay? There's reasonable fear that keeps you from stepping out into oncoming traffic. There's reasonable fear that would keep you from approaching a dangerous looking person or animal. We're not talking about that. Those aren't the kind of fears that pop up and really disturb you. Okay, those are just kind of basic survival fears. And there's basic survival desires. There's things that you want that are perfectly fine. Say you want to study Vedanta. You have to do that. There has to be a desire. You want to eat. You want to sleep. You want to have clothes. you want to have a little bit of money to take care of your bills and things like that, those are totally fine. We're talking about those desires that come up and really disturb your mind, and they're not necessary, because you have to use some amount of willpower, but then also contemplate the fact that there's really nothing to fear and there's really nothing to desire. Right? And that's the kind of thing that really helps you to get a composed mind. So that is the first accomplishment, Shama. The second accomplishment is the control of the senses. Control of the senses is Dama. Now, first we were kind of talking about having equipoise internally, mentally. Okay, now we're talking about having it externally, regarding objects. Same thing applies here. Willpower is necessary. But more importantly, we're going for understanding here. Because when you're understanding, when your thinking is in line with what is true, with how things are, then your actions get in line. Because why? I mean, all of your actions are motivated by your thinking, by what you want, by what you don't want, by what you value, by what you think is right, by what you think is wrong. Okay? So we have to appreciate these things and then apply that to our thinking so it can help us to interact with the external world properly. Again, why? Because if our senses are trying to get in touch with the sense objects, the tongue wants to taste things, the skin wants to touch things, the nose wants to smell things, the eyes want to see things. Basically, we're just trying to get out there and experience objects. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that our attention is out. Okay, we're looking out at the world. The attention of the mind is being rerouted and directed towards objects. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to investigate the subject. And that's not possible when attention is constantly being drawn out. Another practical application is that how we interact with the world around us, kind of creates our life circumstances. If you have an angry mind, for instance, if you can't get rid of the anger in your mind, you can at least restrain your mouth or your hands and legs from either saying something to another person that's hurtful or harmful, or hitting another person, or doing some kind of violence, basically, either verbally or physically. Because these things do what? They create unfavorable circumstances in the world around you. And if your life is a big mess, then it's not going to be conducive to peace of mind, and it's not going to allow you to spend dedicated amount of time solely to self-inquiry. So you have to restrain the senses. Carefully choose how you come in contact with these objects. That includes food. It includes entertainment. It includes sex, for instance. How you do these things. You don't want your attention fixated on these things. You don't want to be making a pig out of yourself, as they say. Moderation is key in all things, and that's going to help keep the mind composed. Right? So we have control of the mind, composure of mind, and we have control of the senses. All right? The third accomplishment is the observance of one's own duty, which is the ability to consistently do what is to be done and to avoid what is not to be done, regardless of personal preference. Okay, this is called Uparama. And as the text says, you're going to be taking care of your responsibilities. All right, life is presenting you with certain situations all the time, according to your own karma. Okay, your life is an expression of your karma. Okay, so whatever job you find yourself in, whatever family situation you find yourself in, whatever things are coming to you, and there's always things coming to you, are you meeting those things and trying to deal with them in the best way possible? Okay, are you fulfilling your responsibilities? And this is a big one, because oftentimes we feel like, hey, it's the modern world. We've got all these things. It's all about doing whatever we want. Hey, I want to be free. I want to be an individual. I don't have to take care of anything I don't want to take care of. I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. Okay, especially Westerners, we kind of have a lot of us do. This is not a blanket statement, but a lot of us tend to have a poor sense of duty, and a definite sense of entitlement. I want what I want when I want it, and I don't want what I don't want. So what's the problem with that? Everything goes back to mental qualities here. That's what we're talking about. The problem is that when you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, it makes you guilty. It makes you feel bad. If you're neglecting things that you need to do, if you're neglecting your family, if you're neglecting your friends, if you're neglecting your own house, if there's a stack of bills that's unpaid, there's projects undone, there's these things that are there for you to take care of, and if you're not doing them, it makes you feel agitated. Okay? I don't know. I mean, if you've ever felt that way, you look out at your life and you feel overwhelmed, that there's all these things happening that need to be done, and that as new things come in, they feel very overwhelming. It's probably because you've not been consistently taking care of what needs to be taken care of on time, in a timely fashion, in a proper way. So this is really important. So according to whatever situation you find yourself in life, you have to try to deal with it properly and to the best of your ability. Now, I'm not saying that that's easy. Okay, it's not always clear sometimes what to do, what you need to do, but you have to make a distinction. And there's also things that come up, there's certain situations that you need to try to change, and there are particular things that happen in life, negative situations that you probably are best to try to avoid. Okay, so there's some discrimination here is required. You have to evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis and try to respond as appropriately as possible. The point is, though, that you respond. Okay, not responding, putting your head in the sand like an ostrich and trying to ignore the things that are happening around you, doing this isn't going to help. You're going to feel guilty, and you're going to eventually feel overwhelmed. So that's Uparama, observing your own duty in life. So this is a direct contradiction to the idea that you need to run away from your life, okay, that you need to abandon your job and abandon your family and abandon your home and go live in some cave or some ashram. Right? That is only suitable for a very small amount of people. It is not suitable for the majority of people. Okay, you need to do what is necessary. Spiritual practice is not separate from your life. So you cannot ignore the things that you need to do in the name of spiritual practice. Oh, well, I'm doing spiritual practice. I don't need to take care of my job. Oh, I'm doing spiritual practice. I don't need to pay attention to my kids. Oh, my kids are such a burden. I can't do spiritual practice with my kids, etc., etc. That's the situation that you found yourself in, the situation that you've created, and you need to deal with that in the best way that you can. And additionally, you need to do it in a way that's in harmony with your own personal nature. And this is tricky. Right? This is called swadharma, okay? Your own personal duty, your own personal nature. That means that you have to try to not only respond to these situations in a timely fashion, and in the most appropriate fashion, you need to try to respond to them in a way that is in harmony with your personal nature, okay, with who you are individually as a person. This doesn't exactly mean that you just say, well, this is what I like, and I'll base my actions on what I like, and I'll not do the things that I don't like. That isn't exactly what we mean. For instance, if you're a introspective artistic type, okay, you probably don't need to try to get a business degree and get a high-powered corporate job, because it's not in harmony with who you are as a person. You're going to feel conflicted. And it's the other way around. If you're a kind of person that is inclined to do business, okay, if you are interested in numbers and commerce and things like that, then it probably is appropriate for you to get a job doing business, possibly get some job in the corporate infrastructure. But it probably wouldn't be appropriate for you to attempt to be, a painter or a musician or something like that. Okay, if it's really just not in harmony with who you are, then you shouldn't be doing those things. Most importantly, that those are all relative situations. You have to judge for yourself the kind of person you are and see if what your life is, maybe what you do for work or the situations that you put yourself in, if those are actually in harmony with who you are as a person. Now, I don't know if you're an artist or if you're a businessman or if you're some other kind of person, but what I do know is that if you come to Vedanta, then you definitely, part of your own swadharma, part of your own nature, is that you are someone who has a desire for spiritual knowledge. Okay, so in that regard, I can say for everybody, you have to evaluate your life and see if the way that you're living your life is in harmony with your spiritual nature. Okay, you have an inclination towards truth. You have an inclination towards studying these teachings. Perhaps you have an inclination towards leading a particularly, like a religious lifestyle or meditation. Are the things that you're doing, are the situations that you're finding yourself in, are they harmonious with that? Maybe you do have a job that is particularly wrong for that situation. You have to evaluate that for yourself, and see if maybe you need to make some appropriate changes. Or maybe you're just involved in a bunch of stuff that's completely unnecessary. Maybe you're watching a bunch of TV or just frittering your time away on the internet, or just playing with your phone, talking on the phone, having frivolous conversations with people about meaningless stuff. If you have a spiritual inclination, if that's part of your swadharma, then you have to take a good hard look at those things and see if there's unnecessary things, frivolous things that don't really have any meaning, that aren't adding any value to your life, and that have nothing to do with your responsibilities. Taking care of your own self and taking care of any other people that happen to be in your family, a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, kids, those kind of things, maybe your parents, that sort of stuff, those are real responsibilities. But spending a bunch of time, watching television or reading a bunch of useless books or magazines or any number of other things that we devote time to, maybe those things aren't necessarily, those aren't necessary. So you have to evaluate those things, and according to your own nature, decide what stays and what goes. So that is Uparama, and part of that, doing your own duty, and part of that is Swadharma, doing your duty according to your own nature. It's a really far-reaching topic, and it's usually a complicated one because life tends to be complicated. But again, you just need to try to do your best. Because if you ignore the things that you need to do and you indulge in things that are against your true nature, then you're going to be very conflicted. Okay? If you're trying to also be something that you're not, if you can't be okay with the person that you are, as you are, then you're going to be conflicted. If you're trying to live up to a particular standard, someone else's standard, if you're trying to live up to someone else's life, try to be like them, then you're possibly, going to be very conflicted. And also too, we're talking about doing your own duty. Okay, if you're constantly trying to look at other people, figure out what they need to do, and if you're trying to interfere all the time in their lives, then you're not looking after your own duty. And when you don't look after your own duty, you're ignoring your responsibilities. You are letting those things go unresolved. You don't work them out for yourself. And also too, if you're constantly doing those things for other people, then you're interfering with them doing their own duty. They're not able to take care of their own things for themselves, if you're always doing it for them. People sometimes tend to do that. They tend to try to always be doing things for other people without actually helping themselves. It is important to lend support to people when they need it. And it is important to take care of the people around you. But you have to do it, again, with some discrimination. You have to look at it and decide what really needs to be done, and then you also have to decide what not to do in order for you to take care of your own stuff. Okay? It takes a mature person to figure these things out. It's not always hard. It's not always easy. It tends to be a very difficult thing to do. So this accomplishment here, doing your own duty and doing it according to your own nature, is one that can take a lot of work, but it is a very important one. So the fourth accomplishment is the capacity to endure difficult and uncomfortable situations. The word for that is Titiksha. We won't spend a lot of time on this. It's just basically that life has its ups and downs. It's not easy. So you have to, knowing that there's difficult situations in life and problems in life, whether it's mental pain or suffering, emotional suffering, or physical suffering, there are parts of that, that you can avoid. There are certain things you can do to avoid mental suffering. There are certain things you can do to avoid physical suffering, but there's parts of it that you just can't avoid. There's external situations that come up that you don't have any direct control over. And in that situation, you just have to be able to, you have to have forbearance. You have to have titiksha. You have to be able to stick with it. You have to be able to endure it, because those things are just going to come up anyway. And if you're not able to endure them, then they're going to, again, they're going to disturb your mind too much. And you're not going to be able to keep your attention on self-inquiry. So you have to have the ability to endure difficult and uncomfortable situations. The fifth accomplishment is an open-minded trust regarding the words of the teacher and the teaching. This is called Shraddha. This is sometimes translated as faith. Okay, but faith is not really the right word here, at least not blind faith. All right. When we say that you have to have a trust, we're saying that it is, you're just remaining open-minded. Okay. Have you ever gone to talk to somebody with a particular idea already in your mind? Okay, you've already made up your mind about it. You've got a belief about something. You've got an opinion about something. And you're going to them under the pretense that, oh, well, I want to see what you think. I actually want to try to understand this better. But really what you're doing is you're just going there to argue. You've got your own mind made up. You're not really going to listen to what they say. This happens a lot of times when you get in arguments with people. Maybe someone, maybe your spouse, maybe your brother, your sister, your parents. It doesn't really matter. You have an opinion or an idea about something, and you're not going to let that go. So when you go to talk to them about it, to discuss it, you're not really open-minded. You're not ready to listen to anything they say or consider what they have to say. And that kind of attitude will completely blow it for you if you're trying to study Vedanta. Because what? We said the first step is listening. Okay, how are you going to listen if you've already made up your mind about certain things? How are you going to be open to hear new ideas? How are you going to be open to receive the logic that Vedanta gives you if you already have made up your mind about who you are and what spirituality is and how the world works, etc.? Okay? So we're saying that you have to go into it with some faith, with an open mind. You have to be willing to hear what is being said. You have to have a trust in the scriptures. When the scripture says, hey, you are Atma, you are the self, you're actually okay, you're limitless, you are non-dual, you're eternal, you're infinite. All of these things, when it's saying that, you have to conditionally take those on board. But it doesn't stop there. Okay, if you just took that on board and stopped there, that would be blind faith or blind belief. And that's not what Vedanta is asking at all. Vedanta is just saying, hey, you got to have an open mind to hear this in the first place. But the good part is that as we go along, we're going to give you the tools. We're going to give you the logic. We're going to give you the ways to be able to investigate these claims for yourself, so you'll be able to see that they're true for yourself. Blind belief, blind faith is not required. Just an open mind. Just be open to hear what's being said and just have some trust in what the teaching is saying until you're able to properly investigate it and make up your mind for yourself. Now we're going over time just a little bit, but I'd like to go to this last part of the sixfold accomplishments, the sixfold disciplines, before we finish this video. Okay, so the last one here is the sixth accomplishment is a single pointed mind that is able to focus on a given topic. The word for that is Samadana. And what is the purpose of single-minded focus? Well, we've been talking about this all along, the fact that Vedanta is continuous discrimination between self and not self, between you, yourself, and objects. And that has to go on all the time, and that is aided by the listening to the teachings and the contemplation of the meaning of the teachings. So, on a very practical level, how are you going to be able to discriminate properly? How are you going to be able to listen to the teaching? How are you going to be able to contemplate its meaning without being able to focus? I mean, it is a common symptom of modern life for people's minds to be very scattered. In the spiritual circles, they might call it monkey mind, because the mind is just jumping from thing to thing. You call it frog mind. You've got frog jumping from lily pad to lily pad to lily pad, doing this, doing that, and the other, incessantly active. Okay, multitasking. Multitasking is like a virtue of modern life. Multitasking is terrible. Okay, it's like the idea. It's like greedy. You're trying to get more out of your time. Okay, doing two things at once is not doing two things well. It's doing two things halfway. Okay, so you're doing one thing halfway and one thing halfway, so you don't end up doing anything very well at all. And what's the problem with multitasking is that you train your mind to continually be divided, to just jump between different things. Okay, I'm on the phone. Oh, I'm cooking. Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, I'm messing around with the computer. Oh, I'm looking over here. Now I'm watching the TV. And your mind just continually gets trained to do that. So what happens then when you sit down to do some Shravana? When you want to do some listening to the teachings. Well, now you're listening. Now you're thinking about something else. Now you're thinking about something else. Now you're playing with the keyboard. Now you've got your phone out looking around. Now you're looking out the window, seeing what's going on over there. you can't focus. And that happens again afterwards when you try to contemplate the meaning. And you're trying to think, okay, let me work out my doubts here about what I heard. Oh, wait, what's that sound? Okay, wait, let me work out my doubts here. Oh, I wonder what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. Let me get my phone out here and check. Oh, okay, wait, sorry, I got to get back to doing some contemplation here. See? Just like that, you know. We're all very familiar with this kind of thing. The mind that's continuously skipping from one thing to the next. And if your mind does that all the time, it's not suited for self-inquiry. Okay, it doesn't have the proper quality. So the ability to focus on a given topic, Samadana, is an essential quality for self-inquiry. So that wraps up all of our the sixfold accomplishments. Okay, control of the mind, a composed mind, control of the senses, observance of one's own duty in accordance with one's nature, the capacity to endure difficult and uncomfortable situations, open-minded trust regarding the words of the teacher and the teaching, and a single-pointed mind that is able to focus on a given topic. That is the sixfold accomplishment or the sixfold discipline, Samadhi, Shatka, Sampatihi. And we will conclude our talk about qualifications in the next video when we take up a burning desire for freedom, mumukshutva. I hope to see you next time. Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam.